The casket was sealed shut. My daughter-in-law said the accident was too horrific for an open viewing. But as I stood there in my black funeral dress, watching people mourn what I thought was my son's body, my phone buzzed with a text that made my world collapse. Mom, I'm alive. That's not me in the coffin. If you think you know where this story is going, you're wrong. What happened next will shock you to your core. But first, hit that subscribe button because this story gets insane. I'm Rosie Thomas, 68 years old, retired high school English teacher. For 40 years, I thought I could read people like the books I taught. I was dead wrong. 2 weeks ago, I buried my son Trevor. Today, I'm here to tell you how that funeral saved both our lives and exposed a criminal conspiracy worth millions of dollars. This isn't fiction. This isn't clickbait. This is what happens when criminals pick the wrong family to mess with. Let me paint you the picture. I raised Trevor alone after his father abandoned us when Trevor was 6. We were close, or so I believed. 3 years ago, he married Norma, and that's when everything started going sideways. Red flags everywhere. She was controlling, manipulative, always inserting herself between Trevor and everyone who cared about him. But I kept quiet because I wanted my son happy. Then 2 weeks before the funeral, Trevor called me, more excited than I'd heard him in years. Mom, Norma and I found this incredible business opportunity in Florida. Real estate development. Life-changing money. My teacher instincts kicked in immediately. Sweetheart, be careful. These investment schemes. It's not a scheme, Mom. This is legitimate. Norma's really good with numbers. She's figured it all out. Something in his voice felt rehearsed, forced. But grief makes you question everything, right? 1 week later, the call every parent dreads. Norma, sobbing hysterically, Rosie, Trevor has been killed in a car accident. The car caught fire. His body is badly burned. I can't bear for you to see him like that. Please let me handle everything. Her performance was Oscar-worthy. But here's the thing about teaching teenagers for 4 decades. You develop a sixth sense for when someone's lying to your face. Still, I agreed to the closed casket. Grief makes you doubt your instincts. But standing there at the funeral, accepting condolences for an empty box, that text message changed everything. Can't explain now. They're watching. Meet me at the old Miller farm tomorrow, 3 p.m. Come alone. Don't trust Norma. The Miller farm, where Trevor used to take dates as a teenager thinking I didn't know. 20 acres of abandoned property, perfect for secret meetings. I barely slept that night. Was my son really alive? Was this some elaborate con? The rational part of my brain said it was impossible. But the message came from Trevor's phone, and who else would know about the Miller farm? The next afternoon, driving down that dirt road, my heart was hammering. Then I saw him emerge from behind the old barn, my son very much alive, looking nervously over his shoulder. When he pulled me into that hug, I knew. This was real. My boy was breathing warm, alive. Mom, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to go through that funeral. But I had to make sure you were safe first. Safe from what? From the people Norma's been working with. Mom, I think they want to kill me for real. Here's where this story gets absolutely insane. Remember my father's old property in Colorado? 40 acres of what everyone thought was worthless mountain land? I'd been paying property taxes on it for years out of habit. Norma had it surveyed without telling us. Turns out there's a natural gas reserve underneath worth tens of millions of dollars. She's been planning this from the beginning, Mom. She married me to get access to that land. But it's in my name, I said, confused. Was in your name. Remember those papers you signed last month? The ones Norma said were for Trevor's life insurance beneficiary updates. My blood went cold. I'd trusted her completely, signed without reading carefully. She forged some of the paperwork, made it look like you were transferring the property to me as part of estate planning. Then she had me sign papers making her the sole heir if anything happened to me. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. If Trevor dies, she inherits land worth millions. But here's where it gets even worse. The people Norma was working with weren't just paperwork fraudsters. They were professional criminals who'd done this before, targeting elderly people with valuable assets they didn't know they had. I overheard a phone call, Trevor explained. Norma was talking to someone about how they'd handle my accident. She was planning funeral arrangements before I was supposed to be dead. That's when Trevor realized he had maybe hours before they made their move. So he disappeared, faking his death to buy time and protect me. Whose body is in that casket? I asked. Nobody's. It's weighted with sandbags. My son had been hiding in an abandoned farmhouse, trying to figure out how to expose these criminals before they realized their plan had failed. For 40 years I'd protected this boy from scraped knees, broken hearts and teenage mistakes. Now he needed me to help him survive something far more dangerous. What do you need me to do? That evening I went to Norma's house, playing the grieving mother-in-law while my very much alive son hid in that farmhouse. She had documents spread across the kitchen table, papers that would transfer my Colorado property to her control. I know this is difficult, she said with those crocodile tears, but we need to start thinking about Trevor's estate. I played confused elderly woman perfectly. Why would Trevor's estate need anything to do with my land? Her mask slipped for just a moment, pure irritation flashing across her face before the grieving widow returned. Trevor was handling your estate planning, remember? He wanted everything simple for you as you get older. The condescension in her voice made my teeth clench. But I forced gratitude. That's so thoughtful. But I'm not that old, dear. When I suggested having my lawyer review the documents first, the temperature in that room dropped 10 degrees. Sit down, Rosie. We're not finished here. The grieving widow was gone. Something much more dangerous had taken her place. I drove home convinced Norma had figured out I knew too much. I was right. 3 men were waiting in my living room when I walked through my front door. They'd made themselves comfortable, turned on my lamps like they owned the place. Mrs. Walsh, said the one in my late husband's recliner, a forgettable face that was absolutely terrifying. We need to talk. My teacher instincts kicked in, the same calm authority I'd used with unruly teenagers for 4 decades. I don't recall inviting anyone into my home. You need to leave immediately. The man smiled, and it was worse than any threat. I'm afraid we can't do that. See, there's been some confusion about your son's business affairs. Then he showed me a grainy photo of Trevor taken that afternoon near the Miller farm. Your son owes us money. $2.5 million plus interest. Since he's decided to play dead instead of paying up, we're collecting from his next of kin. They knew everything about the land, about Trevor hiding, about the money. Norma had told them before Trevor's supposed death. This whole elaborate scheme was Plan A. Now they were moving to Plan B. Sign over that Colorado property and your son's debt is forgiven. He can even come home and pretend to rise from the dead. Very biblical. The man leaned forward. Or keep protecting him and we'll find him eventually anyway. Then we'll collect the money and make sure he never bothers us again. Along with anyone who helped him hide. Crystal clear threat. Cooperate or die. You have until tomorrow night. Norma will bring you the papers. They left as casually as they'd arrived, and I stood in my violated living room, shaking with rage and terror. But here's what these criminals didn't understand. They'd just made a fatal mistake. They thought they were dealing with a frightened old woman who'd do anything to save her son. They had no idea they'd just picked a fight with someone who'd spent 40 years outsmarting people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. The next morning I called Marcus Chin, my lawyer, but more importantly my former student from 30 years ago when he was a rebellious teenager trying to coast through senior English. Now he runs one of the most respected criminal defense firms in the state. Rosie Thomas, he said with a genuine smile. You still look like you're ready to terrorize us with Shakespeare. I laid out the entire story. The fake funeral, the forged documents, the death threats. Marcus's expression shifted from amusement to fascination. You realize you're describing multiple felonies here. The smart thing would be to call the FBI right now. And watch my son spend years in prison while these criminals disappear? There has to be another way. Marcus studied me with the same look he'd given when I handed back his failed midterm senior year. What exactly are you proposing? I want to give them what they want, but on my terms. Can you draw up documents that look legitimate but contain legal landmines they won't notice until it's too late? 3 hours later, I left his office with a briefcase full of papers that looked exactly like what Norma expected, but contained enough hidden clauses to ensure they'd be confessing to multiple felonies the moment they signed them. That evening, I met Norma at the Riverside Diner, public, well-lit, and where Sheriff Tom Bradley ate dinner every Tuesday night. Perfect for witnesses. Norma arrived with David, Trevor's supposed business partner. Actually the man who'd threatened me in my living room. I thought this was going to be private, David said, noting the sheriff's presence. It is private. No one's paying attention to us. I pushed aside their forged documents and pulled out Marcus's masterpiece. Actually, I had my lawyer prepare something more comprehensive. He made sure these documents protect everyone's interests. For 20 minutes, I watched them review papers that contained legal poison pills in every paragraph. Marcus had used technical language that obscured the document's true purpose while making them appear favorable to Norma and her associates. "This seems more complicated than necessary," Norma said. "Well, dear, when you're dealing with millions of dollars, you can't be too careful." Marcus insisted on including provisions to protect against any previous irregularities in the property's ownership history. What I wasn't telling them, by signing these documents, they'd be legally acknowledging previous criminal activity and accepting responsibility for reporting it to federal authorities. When David suggested having their lawyer review everything first, I created urgency. Marcus said the property tax implications change significantly after midnight tonight. Something about quarterly reporting requirements and federal oversight. Complete nonsense, but it sounded official enough to pressure them into signing immediately. While they read through documents that would destroy them, I excused myself to the restroom. Instead, I walked straight to Sheriff Bradley's table. "Tom, I need to report multiple felonies and I have written confessions from the perpetrators." I quickly explained the situation while watching Norma and David, who were still planning how to spend their millions. "Rosie, these people threatened to kill you and your son. They made their intentions very clear." I showed him the documents. "My lawyer designed these papers so that by signing them, they've legally acknowledged their criminal activities." Tom examined the papers, his 20 years of police experience evident in how quickly he grasped the implications. "This is incredibly clever and completely legal. There's something else. My son isn't actually dead." "Come again." I showed him the photos I'd taken of the forged documents in Norma's kitchen. "I have evidence of fraud, extortion, and conspiracy, and now I have their signed confessions." Tom smiled with genuine admiration. "Rosie, in 30 years of police work, I've never seen a civilian conduct a more thorough criminal investigation." But I wasn't done yet. Before the arrests, I needed to confirm where they were meeting their bosses to deliver the signed documents. "Back at the booth. Where do we go from here?" "We need to get these documents to our legal team tonight. There's a warehouse on Industrial Boulevard where we're meeting them." "Perfect." Industrial Boulevard was isolated enough for a police raid without civilian casualties. "I suppose you'll need me there to verify my identity?" "Shli, no. Your signature is all we need. You can go home and rest." Of course they didn't want me there. I was supposed to wait quietly while they celebrated stealing millions from a grieving mother. As I left the diner, Sheriff Bradley was coordinating with state and federal authorities. 20 minutes later, I parked on a hill overlooking the warehouse district, watching through binoculars as 3 cars converged on the building Norma had mentioned. Car 1, Norma and David. Car 2, the men who'd threatened me. Car 3, 2 people I didn't recognize, probably the bosses running this operation. They were inside exactly 12 minutes before the building was surrounded by FBI agents with floodlights and megaphones. "This is the FBI. The building is surrounded. Exit with your hands visible." No gunfights, no chase scenes. Just 6 criminals walking out with their hands up, realizing too late they'd been outmaneuvered by a retired English teacher. Sheriff Bradley called as the last suspect was loaded into a police car. "It's over. We got all of them, plus evidence of at least 12 other property fraud cases in 6 states. Trevor was waiting on my porch when I got home, and seeing him there, alive, safe, free, nearly brought me to my knees with relief. "Is it really over?" "It's over. Norma and her associates are in federal custody." 3 weeks later, I received a letter from the federal prosecutor. Norma and her associates faced 23 felonies across 6 states, with evidence linking them to property fraud schemes targeting elderly victims nationwide. The FBI recovered over $40 million in stolen assets. But the real victory was simpler than justice or money. It was Trevor learning to trust again. It was me discovering at 67 that I was far stronger than anyone had imagined. And it was the knowledge that sometimes, when people underestimate you, that underestimation becomes the very weapon you need to protect everything you love. The funeral was fake, but my son's resurrection was beautifully, powerfully real. Here's what I learned. Criminals count on victims being too scared, too confused, or too trusting to fight back. They prey on people who seem vulnerable. But here's what they don't understand. A mother protecting her child is the most dangerous force in the universe. Especially when that mother has spent 40 years teaching teenagers that actions have consequences. If this story taught you anything, let it be this. Trust your instincts. Ask questions. Verify everything. And remember, you're stronger than you think you are. Don't forget to subscribe and let me know in the comments. What would you have done in my situation? Your voice matters, and your story could help someone else who's facing their own impossible situation. Sometimes the best defense is a brilliant offense. And sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, check out these other incredible true crime stories that will blow your mind. And remember, subscribe for more unbelievable but true stories that prove reality is stranger than fiction.